Okay, I want to welcome our audience. Welcome to the Ready, Set, Gemini podcast. I am your host, Dan Mora, and my co-host directly across from me.
Hey, everybody, it's Frank.
Thank you for joining us. As always, we love feedback. Please comment in the comments section of this show. We're also looking for future show ideas. Put those in the comments. Like, follow, subscribe, comment, do all that fun stuff. Right?
Comment. We need people to talk about what we're talking about so we can better understand what to talk about.
Definitely. Right on. So today we have 3 stories that we're going to cover and try to circle it back to workers' compensation to the best of our ability. So in order, we're going to talk about the James Webb telescope, which is cool.
Super cool.
We're going to talk about AB 5. There's some news on AB 5, which was passed in 2019. And then our last story is a woman that died at 114 years old here in Northern California.
It's pretty awesome. What was she eating?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
We should ask. Oh, we can't ask her. We could ask her family. But that's interesting. You know, they have done studies, and we'll kind of get into this, but they have done studies on what is it, in Okinawa. It has the oldest population and, you know, fish and very pure, clean diet. Yeah.
Yeah, they call them blue zones or something like that. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with hair color, I don't think. James Webb. So James Webb ran NASA from 61 to 68. And this story, the James Webb telescope, what tell me why you're interested in it, or what's most interesting to you about this?
I think the tech alone just to get the satellite up into space is pretty amazing. I did a lot of research early on, like looking at how they were putting the mirrors together and all the work to make that happen and then to deploy it. That alone is amazing. And now we're getting, you know, better pictures from space. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of like, it's super awesome, but at the same time, it's kind of comical when you think about like how big the universe is. I kind of think of like, hey, we had an iPhone 6 and now we have an iPhone 7, right? Like up in space, like Hubble to James Webb. In the grand scheme of things, James Webb is so much more like tech, right? You can see so much more, but like, what does that really tell us about the universe? Like in another 150 years, what's the next biggest thing? Like that's what's amazing is how technology just keeps advancing and advancing.
I admit I have like done almost no. I didn't follow the social media stuff. I'm curious what else is kind of piquing people's interest about this story.
About James Webb?
Yeah, about this telescope.
I think everybody just has wonderment with space, and the more we can understand, you know, the better off we are as a human race. I think a lot of stuff comes from space understanding. We talked about medicine and how there's been, you know, newfound fronts from going into space and working in space that then kind of translate back down here. Same thing with like climate. Think of navigating, you know, 200 years ago versus now, just with like satellites and simple things like that. So it's a big world that I don't have a lot of understanding around, but it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I think one storyline for me in this is, you know, the trade-off of funding, to be specific. You wonder about the federal funding, and who knows? I mean, I'm sure somebody can quote the billions of dollars that were spent, and you know, how that maybe could have been spent better to, you know, help needs here at home.
Well, I think it was like 10 billion-ish.
Wow.
For James Webb.
Wow.
I'm kind of, how much is the bullet train in California? It goes nowhere. Like that's in the billions too, right? Is it like 10 billion as well?
I don't know what that one is, but that's a funny story too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we have all these issues in the world, and where does the money go?
Like hunger,
education,
waste, or what do you call it? You know, environmental cleanup. Like what could, how do you say 10 billion?
Climate change.
But like, you know, what's that floating island of trash in the Pacific?
Yeah, they're doing some cool stuff with that right now.
Are they?
Which is pretty nice. Yeah. What's that? There was that one kid, he was like 18 years old when he came up with the idea. He went through college, and they've actually done a deployment now to where they're taking like these big buoys and kind of like funneling everything to a conveyor belt that pulls it out.
Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, again, what the federal funding for space exploration. I see some application to medicine, and I think that's good. But what's the trade-off? $10 billion. What could that do for our environment?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's money coming in to do all these other things. Everybody has their own interests, and they're all trying to get that cash to make big changes. I personally feel like we need to figure out what's going on here. If James Webb can help us do some of that too, then, well worth it. But yeah, it's like, what are we going to do? Are we going to like let this planet burn and just get off of it and go to another one?
Right.
Or are we going to like fix the planet we're on and not worry so much about space travel? Or is it a combination of both?
Mm-hmm.
And I think naturally both is occurring. Mm-hmm. Maybe not at the pace individuals would like, but anytime you see advancements in tech, you should celebrate it.
Yeah, I agree. It just we in California there's a homeless situation, and I know the state has a surplus of several $billion right now. I'm sure this is a bill cycle. There's bills currently being debated in budget committees this month. That would, I think there's some ideas there on like homelessness and such, but
what about water?
Water, huge.
I mean,
gosh,
homelessness has been around for a long time. The water issue is relatively new.
Yeah.
With the way things are working out, and we don't really have problems to solve it.
Yeah, I think you
mentioned desal. We were talking earlier.
Yeah.
And even that's got a lot of problems.
There's the waste from desalination. But I watched a documentary on Israel and how their economy was massively burdened by lack of water, huge problem, and they completely turned their economy around through desalination.
Sure.
Water. What are they doing with the waste byproducts?
They're throwing it back in the ocean?
I hope not.
That's what most people are doing, and it's not just like the higher concentration of salt that's the problem. It like the process itself puts a lot of weird metals and other things that are not good for the ocean.
Yeah, so. That's not good. We at least ship it to Nevada.
It's interesting how like the solutions that we end up coming up with just create like additional problems.
Yeah.
Like when I think of like an electric car, it's like we decided to move from one non-renewable resource to another one, which I think works really great for capitalism and making money. Right?
Does it slow pollution? Does it slow climate change?
I think it changes it from one place to another. I mean, lithium, right, is what we're talking about from the batteries. They're trying to advance that, so you can use less and get more. So even if you're taking solar or wind power to charge the lithium batteries, you're still pulling the lithium out of the earth to make it happen. Compared to like a hydrogen fuel cell, you really have something that's
renewable forever.
Thing, right?
Yeah.
They're talking about doing more of the like geothermal stuff, which I always thought that was kind of interesting, but that's not a renewable resource.
Oh,
yeah.
How so?
Think about a cup of coffee, right? You pour it and it's hot. You put it in a thermos, holds everything in place, and then but you put like a little straw in it that's a superconductor, so it's going to pull energy out, and then you like dissipate that heat into the world. Is a coffee cup going to stay warm forever?
Yeah.
It's like we're going to have little ticks like sucking on the earth, pulling all the energy out,
pulling the core.
Yeah. It won't impact you or your kids or your kids' kids, but Michio Kaku stuff comes to mind. He's a scientist that talks about the stages of like life, and we're like in this 0 stage, and then like stage 1 is when like the civilization actually has complete control over their planet, like weather and all of what the planet does. So you can put it into a homeostasis indefinitely. Then the next stage is like stars, and they go further. But from 0, where you don't have control, to 1, that's like the most dangerous place to be. And if you think about how humans are right now with like nuclear technology, virus technology, even what we're kind of running into now with like video, right? Like deep fakes, things like that. These are all technologies that have tremendous benefit to human, but they can also be used for, end of world type scenarios.
Yeah.
So that transition is kind of like where we're at. We just happen to live in a very interesting place where, who's to say in the next 200, 500 years, we won't have complete control over this planet and all these things, climate change stuff that we're worried about now. It's like not going to be an issue anymore. What does that world look like? Is it more utopian?
Wow. That's
sorry.
No, I'm glad you went there. I'm glad you went there, because it allows me to kind of, let's bring it back. Okay, Frank, let's bring it back. But, the one thing that we tried to relate this story to was the medical advances. And I wonder too, I think about this a bit, what about universal medicine? How is that going to affect workers' compensation? The advances in medical technology is our work injuries. And you combine the advances of medical technology and then you add universal medicine. If you're an injured worker, why would you put yourself through a workers' compensation claim minus the wage benefits? So there's the wage benefits, but the medical benefits and the I don't know. It's a question. I'm curious to see if our audience has any thoughts on this. It's something I've brought up to a few thought leaders in our industry. Hey, universal medicine. It's a bill. It's a bill this year. It was a bill a couple years ago. There's a lot of people wanting it to happen. And
interesting. We were talking about where the money is spent too. I think a piece of that you were mentioning again earlier in a conversation we were having, how like the doctors aren't necessarily the ones that are making the decisions for care. It's more about like a book and all the bureaucracy that kind of came from probably bad actors in the past.
Definitely. Yeah, that whole, my dad's a doctor. He's a chiropractor. And he, he values the relationship, of course, between the patient and the doctor, and they're trained to read the person, the whole person, and understand their entire, where they're at, so that they can make medical decisions. I think the same is true. In fact, I talked to a judge not too long ago, and with COVID not being able to see injured workers in court, he made the comment that is not great for justice. If you have a judge, you have a prosecutor, and a defender that have eyes on the plaintiff, the empathy, the natural empathy that you have is valuable. It's valuable for justice. It's valuable for medicine.
I think that makes sense. The world's not going that direction though. Like at some point, Dan, like they're going to make every decision based on data, right? It's not going to be like a human thinking about things.
I know.
We talked a little bit about automation and stuff like that. I think there's another topic. Maybe we're going to bring that up. But like they're going to automate healthcare. Like doctors are probably not going to be around forever too. And how do you feel about that? Because we talk about this empathy piece. Like, is AI going to have empathy?
It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
So James Webb's kind of that thing that takes you out to space. So that's why these conversations just seem like there's an opportunity to go wild with them,
Yeah. Well, it's a good segue. It's a good segue. So AB5 is in the news again. There was a trucker demonstration, protest, what do they call that? Down at the ports. So there's port workers that are protesting to be on the exemption list. And AB5, to recap, was called the gig worker bill, and it was put into place by our governor Newsom on September 2019.
It's really like to fight back against more so the taxi / Uber Lyft type model, right?
Yeah, the argument is minimum wage, paid sick leave, paid family leave, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation insurance, short-term disability insurance. So that was the pro AB5. Now these port workers are saying they don't want that. They want to be in the exempt class, and I have criticism for how this was written. I do lobby a little bit, and I help write regulation, and I have helped give some influence to statute, and very little. I'm not saying I'm an expert by any means, but to me there's a flaw in the way that this was written. AB5 was written, and it's very simple that they put this blanket statement that you are an employee unless you're an employee, unless you apply for an exemption as a specifically in your work type or the type of work that you do. So here's the list of exemptions that came out in AB5. Doctors, lawyers, architects, engineers, private investigators, accountants, securities brokers, investment advisors, direct sales salespersons, commercial fishermen working on an American vessel, travel agents, graphic designers, grant writers, estheticians, electrologists, interesting, manicurists, that's my favorite, barbers, cosmetologists. And then in 2020, September 2020, they passed AB 2257, which extended the list, okay? Photojournalists, videographers, fine artists, freelance writers, translators, editors, illustrators, and newspaper cartoonists, content contributors, advisors, narrators, cartographers, producers, copy editors, insurance underwriters, consulting services. That's interesting.
So could we build like an Uber model for any one of those exempt and then be? I mean, that's basically
100%.
what happened, right? Like
100%.
Uber built a software platform for individuals to use to manage their taxing, essentially. That's all it really was. So the end user had a huge benefit to be able to quickly find a taxi, right? Instead of making a phone call. And the individuals using that system had like a client base that they could pull from and the app to make it work. But over time, like the way that Uber like sets everything up, they really are running it like a business, but then they're not paying their people like it's their employees. That's where this whole thing came from. But there's plenty of industries, obviously, that have been working in that same type of paradigm,
Right,
that
right.
didn't make as much money.
Right.
And so then all the money is involved, and now all of a sudden this is like a big deal, right? Are they really interested in protecting the workers, or are they interested in the tax revenue?
$1 million question, and I'm a little bit of a cynic, and I would say that this was just poorly written. And I'm a little bit of a cynic. I would say that the politicians that wanted this were after tax revenue, were after some sort of revenue, so employment tax revenue to be specific.
Yeah, exactly. So with these truckers, to me, it's like, go ahead and protest. Like, you'll probably get on the list. But is that like I guess it's the biggest concern like right now, but there's some other things that they should be thinking about. Like we talk about Uber, like they would eventually like to have no people driving the cars, right? And then when you think about trucks, like Tesla's been putting a huge amount of money in like developing an electric truck and the automated driving technology. Like if they can figure that out and there's no more need for people, right? Now we're talking about like this concept of automation.
Yeah, automation. Yeah. I think it says, it's interesting, but I think it says that, the bill says that everybody should be an employee. And then the employees say, oh, no, we don't agree. You're trying to protect me, but I don't need to be protected. And so we're going to lobby to get our group not protected by this new law. But you're right. I think the right tie-in in what you're talking about, okay, well, how is this type of economy, the gig economy, how is that How does it take advantage of people? Great question. How does it take advantage of people? It's probably where the origination, I'm sure, where the origination of the bill comes from. And then the implications of automation, you're right. Like, is it a slow burn or a slippery slope from, taking people, gig workers, I just want you for an hour or 2 hours or whatever that case is, to we don't want employees anymore.
I mean, it's funny how this is why they call it the machine, right? Like the capitalistic machine, is because it kind of goes on its own regardless of like the human involvement. You're creating regulation to protect people, but the company needs to like find ways to be profitable. That's kind of how the company drives. So then what are the things that they can do? And every time there's regulation that may come about, it's possible that it can like push the need for automation, right?
Yeah. I mean, it makes it harder to, as a business owner, more regulation, more standards. It hurts the simplification of a business, which costs money. So how do we, or how do business owners, I mean, you're part owner, how do we balance that? How do we make decisions that, and our decision, I guess, to be, I don't know, not self-promoting, but our goal or our mission is to keep growing. And when we grow, we try to add the least amount of people that's possible.
And is that really good for the economy in a sense? Like what we at Gemini try to do, which I think is altruistic, is we try to make sure that the people that we have employed, those people are going to be taken care of.
Right.
So when we move towards ideas of automation to save money, reduce waste, things like that, we want to retain those people and allow them to like flex over into other areas as we grow. But what we're not doing is we're not hiring new people, right? And like providing more jobs to more and more. I mean, we are, because we can't keep up with the pace that we would need to from a technology perspective to handle the incoming work.
Automation isn't pacing with the growth.
But we want that.
That would be great.
And we're also in like a major growth cycle where we, got big recently really fast. So, but that's not saying that that's the drive that we're going to.
Yeah. Is it good? I think it all, I know I think about this a lot, but it leads me to like universal income. That what they continue to do is seek, and it's amazing, the budget surplus that California has in the billions of dollars. When businesses are making more profit, they pay more taxes. That money goes to public service in some way, shape, or form. Should. So I would hope that the government and our politicians act responsibly and put that surplus to education, put it to healthcare. And I think that, to me, there's this ramp, this logical ramp of increase in public benefits. You can include bailouts into that, but public benefits from healthcare and from education, it keeps increasing, and it'll get to a level where I think they'll have to possibly start doing universal income. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because the jobs are just going to dry up, maybe, from automation. That's the.
I mean, I'd be really interested to see how that works. I mean, what we're seeing now in the United States is more separation of wealth than we've ever seen before, right? The richer keep getting richer, and the poor keep getting poorer. The middle class keeps getting shrunk. I think that the whole way that this idea of capitalism is built on the concept of like consumerism. And what we're finding is that consumerism is bad for the planet. So it takes out like the environment.
But isn't that human nature? Like how do you remove that from human nature? Consumerism. We want stuff. People want stuff. You want something, I'm going to help you. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I mean, think about the way that it's like more regulation to fix these problems. And we know that regulation in itself has all these problems. We talked about like 40,000, laws a year are popping up. Like can anybody even read that? Like,
No way.
nobody knows what law is. It's ridiculous, right? Not even lawyers that read it every day. Like, ask them about something else that's not in their niche, they're not going to know. So on this idea of consumerism, like the businesses today that are driven to make profit are producing products that can be consumed at a faster click, right? So I just went and did this volunteer at Deer Creek Farms over here in Rockland, and they have this beautiful like outdoor farm area that they, try to make profit on, and they support like the foster kids that are too old. They get out of the system at 18 or whatever. So they supply jobs and give them some like training opportunities and stuff all through this like farm that they manage.
Right.
And while I was there was this really cool like swinging like love seat that was made out of like iron or whatever. And I walked up to it and I just tapped it and it just started swinging back and forth. Perfect. This thing looks like it was probably built 100 years ago, and it was sitting outside in the elements, and it was perfectly functioning. Like, I challenge anyone today to go out and buy like something that would last like this product would.
That would cost a lot, though. I hear what you're saying. Should we be making things that last hundreds of years?
If you bought one of those, right, versus buying 10 of those in your lifetime, like it.
But shoot, I'm living in an apartment and I'm going to be moving, and I don't know how long. I want to buy a house. So while I'm living in an apartment, I'd like a cool chair. It's going to be made of plastic, and it's going to cost me 5% of what that it costs to make that.
It's a paradigm shift. Like, how did everything come to this consumerism? Like, the 80s is really what like pushed a lot of that, right?
But two, you think
material.
About if you want something, people want something, and I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm going to supply it to you. And I know that if I supply that thing to you and you're going to pay me, I'm going to make a living off of it.
Sure.
And I have my own personal desires, and I want to go to Hawaii next spring. So I'm going to sell you more. Do you want more? Do you want more? Do you want more? Hey, tell your buddies, because if they want some, I got some too. Here's my plastic chair.
I get it.
It's a human nature thing is kind of what I'm getting at. I'm not even, Frank's Utopia. I'd love to visit
if they could afford something that was better, that they knew that would last a long time, would they make the choice to do that?
That's a
right?
great question. So I would say probably
99% of the wealth is in the top, 1%, how is anyone ever going to be able to afford anything that's like lasting? And this is a cyclical thing, right? Like, it goes in waves. Like, we're at a weird place in the United States where like the bottom can raise up. And
I don't know if that's the right perspective. Again, I'm 25 years old and I'm living in an apartment, and there's no way I'm going to buy a 100-year-old chair. I'm going to buy a 6-month chair because first off, it's within my budget. But I probably could afford, if I was saved up, I'd buy myself a 100-year chair maybe. But I don't know if I really want to lug that thing around. I want to travel Europe or whatever the case may be. I just need a chair.
If you think about it, like, if more people made quality products, would all of those products like...
But you're speaking on behalf of the entrepreneur. So as the entrepreneur says, I'm going to make high quality products, I'm still going to sell to as many people as I can.
Because that's the nature of business in the capitalistic society. You got to produce more, even though it's not necessarily right.
It's human nature. In my opinion, it's human nature. Yeah. So for our audience, we want to hear from you. Which one is right? You're buying a 100-year chair, or you're buying a 6-month chair, or you're the entrepreneur. Are you selling 100-year chairs, or you're selling 6-month chairs?
Maybe we should be asking our audience the question, like, how do we solve these problems? Like, we know that it's a problem.
Solving, yeah. So
what are the ways that you can go
from where I'm
solution?
Coming? Solving human nature is very educational, like generational education thing. Yeah. And that's noble
and cultural.
Yeah, cultural is influenced by, I think, education hugely, for sure.
Sure.
But I think thought leaders end up in education, and that's what. That's their contribution to the society. I want this to be less, let me make a bend. I'm a professor, and I'm going to make a bend. Less consumerism is good.
Sure.
Though, there's the opposite. People.
More consumerism is good.
Correct.
Yeah.
Our last story, a woman Mila Mangold. She's the oldest person in California, dies at 114. So we have just a couple of minutes on this topic. I think, what do you think are some of the takeaways?
The first thing I just come to is like, what's she eating? Because that would be fantastic to live to 114, as long as she was healthy the whole time, right? But I think what we're thinking about is like, man, 114 years ago, what was the world like?
Mm-hmm. Is it better or worse?
Is it better or worse?
A lot of things have happened. 114 years, a lot has changed in 114 years. What do they say? What's the Moore's Law? Is that the things have changed more? The more time goes by, the faster things change.
Oh, sure. Yeah, like
right.
You're on this like exponential scale, right?
Right. And
Iron Age to Bronze Age to Iron Age.
Right.
Took forever.
So like the changes in climate, the changes in pollution, the changes in medical, the changes in technology, changes in consumerism,
climate,
mass production. A lot of changes, specifically some more comp things, labor laws. With mass production in the early 20th century came entrepreneurs taking advantage of employees, mm-hmm. and politicians that said, nope, no longer we're representing the man, the worker, and we're going to put labor laws. So a lot of labor laws came into effect in the early 20th century. Better or worse?
Yeah, that's a difficult topic. I think unions like really have a place. They do protect workers, but at the same time, like I can see how unions can also burden like growth in the same sense. Everybody I think can agree 100% that like people should be able to like have health and like work for something where they feel like they can be successful and not get injured or taken advantage of, right? But if you're in a union and let's say like there's some tenure concept and there's other people out there that can actually perform the job better, but because of like unions, like it's difficult to get those people in play. Like, how does that like benefit society as a whole?
Yeah.
I think I always come back to this idea of, we were working with the unions to like set up our booth, mm-hmm. and they wanted to charge us like $500 or something astronomical to take a pallet that we had already stacked from our car and to move it across the floor to drop it to where we can do all the work to set it up. So it was literally like maybe 2 minutes and 22 seconds, like moving something with a pallet jack for $500. Like, how does that make any sense? Right? Yeah. Unions were able to influence their power to be able to make that actually be a thing to where you couldn't use other labor other than the union workers. Right. And so they're getting paid a higher wage, which obviously everybody should have an opportunity for a higher wage, but at what cost? Like, it doesn't make sense to.
It's like a tax. It's like a tax. That's how I would think about it.
Sure.
And I don't know. I think there's some debate on whether it is a tax, but it feels like a tax. And I don't think that that's. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair. Something's wrong.
I also think
it's move a pallet, 100 yards and charge us $500.
Yeah.
Something's wrong there.
I also think it doesn't make sense to like have people out, in 102-degree weather working on a farm, bending over the whole entire time,
right.
Getting
not having bathrooms,
blisters on their hands. Yeah. Not having bathrooms,
breaks.
Getting pesticide sprayed on top of their heads.
Yeah.
And getting paid like a super low wage. Like those people need someone to go to the bat for them. So it's like, there's positives and negatives to everything, really.
There's balance. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we do a horrible job at balancing things in the United States. I think we've gone so far trying to figure it out that there's so much bureaucracy, it's impossible to navigate anything anymore.
Yeah.
Is really what it feels like.
Yeah. Bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake is just about the most horrible waste that there actually is. Yeah.
We've talked about how do you make like a government go lean. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it requires people Gosh, a different episode, completely different episode.
Sorry. Squirrel.
Yeah. Well, okay. So one of the funniest things that we researched we researched the Depression, and this woman.
Yeah, depression is super funny, Dan.
No, I don't mean it that way.
I know.
There is one of the popular foods is called mulligan stew.
Oh, gross.
So it had tobacco flavor in it. So it's funny, it's like somebody trips and falls and hurts themselves, and you see it on video and you're like, that's funny. And you're like, well, that person was hurt.
Yeah.
Is it really that funny? No. People that I suppose are in poverty and have to eat tobacco flavored mulligan stew.
Yeah, tobacco flavored on top of that.
I mean, I feel feel for Mila, and I hope that she realized the finer things in life and later in her in her years.
It puts things in perspective of like how we think about the world around us and the trials and tribulations that we go through. This country itself has been in much more dire times.
Yeah,
we're so influenced by media. Whatever path you take on each side, it's just like constantly bombarding your brain.
Yeah.
Now kids, instead of getting tobacco flavored mulligan stew, they get on their bikes, they ride down to the corner store and pick up a pack of Pop Rocks. It's like, hey, no problem. I can get whatever I want whenever I want. That wasn't always a thing.
I saw I was watching History Channel, and there was the evolution of snack cakes, individually wrapped snack cakes. It was just super interesting, very interesting.
Like a little hostess type thing?
Yep. Hostess, Little Debbie, Intamins. Yeah, it was very interesting. Yep, things have changed. So that will wrap up our discussion. Yeah.
Sweet.
We're all done. Again, we'd love to hear from our audience. If we said something that you don't like, tell us about it. Something that you want to comment on, tell us about it. Subscribe, like, follow, comment. I'm definitely excited to hear feedback and ideas for future topics. Frank, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this was fun, interesting for sure.
Yeah. All right, and you have a good one.
You too.